What happened? If a child got lost in the Stone Age. Imagine this: a small group of people is moving through a forest. Some are gathering berries. Others are searching for edible roots. Children are running nearby. Laughter fills the air. Everything seems peaceful, but then one woman suddenly notices something strange. One voice is missing. She looks around, counts the children again, and again. Then she realizes, one child is gone. Just a minute ago, he was right here. And now it is as if he has vanished among the trees. And at that very moment, one of the most terrifying stories that could happen tens of thousands of years ago begins. What happened if a child got lost in the Stone Age? And did that child have any real chance of finding the way home? To answer that question, we need to travel back to a world without roads, maps, phones, or rescue teams. A world where getting lost meant facing nature completely alone. And nature was not always kind. First, it is important to understand one thing. Children in the Stone Age were rarely far from adults, and it was not because of strict rules. The world around them was simply too dangerous. Today, a child can wander 100 meters away from their parents, and most likely, nothing will happen. Back then, every few dozen steps could hide a new threat: a steep ravine, a swamp, a fast-moving river, or an animal that had absolutely no fear of humans. That is why most children stayed close to the group. But children have always been children. Curiosity existed long before civilization. Sometimes all it took was noticing an unusual footprint on the ground, a brightly colored bird, or an interesting stone. A few minutes, a few extra steps, and suddenly, every tree looks the same. The familiar voices can no longer be heard. And this is where the most dangerous part of the story begins. Not predators, not cold, but losing your sense of direction. Modern research reveals something fascinating. Children often remember landmarks better than adults. They notice unusual trees, rocks, hill shapes, and tiny details others overlook. But at the same time, children are much more vulnerable to panic, and panic can destroy even the best sense of direction. Imagine this: a child realizes they are lost. Their heart starts beating faster. Fear begins to grow. They try to go back, but they cannot remember where they came from. So they choose a direction at random, then another, then another. And with every step, they may be moving farther away from the searchers. Scientists studying modern cases of lost children in forests have noticed a surprising pattern. Very often, a lost child does not move toward safety. They simply keep walking, even when it makes the situation worse. Now imagine the same situation tens of thousands of years ago. There are no buildings, no signs, no familiar landmarks, only endless wilderness. But what was happening back at the camp? The moment adults realized a child was missing, the normal day ended instantly. The search began at once. Everyone could join: men, women, teenagers, because a child was incredibly valuable to the group. Today, that may sound obvious, but for an ancient tribe, every child represented the future: a future hunter, a gatherer, a keeper of knowledge, the continuation of the group itself. Archaeologists have discovered many ancient child burials showing how deeply children were valued. Some were buried with ornaments, tools, and precious objects. These discoveries suggest that children held a special place within their communities. That is why search efforts could continue until complete exhaustion. But how do you search for someone without technology? The answer was a skill that almost seems like a superpower today. Experienced hunters could read the ground like a book: a broken branch, a fresh footprint, flattened grass, the tiny impression of a child's foot. To us, these details might seem invisible. To them, they were clues. Some modern trackers can determine not only where a person went, but also how fast they were moving, and even what condition they were in. Were they rushing, running, or walking calmly? The best Stone Age hunters were probably even better at this. But there was one problem: time. Because the sun kept moving toward the horizon, and night changed everything, many people assume predators were the greatest danger. And yes, they were a threat. Depending on the region, children might face wolves, hyenas, big cats, or bears, but studies of large predators show that most of them prefer avoiding humans whenever possible. Far more often, the real dangers were something else: darkness, cold, thirst, fear. At night, a familiar forest becomes a completely different place. Even an adult can lose their sense of direction. Now imagine a small child. Every sound feels dangerous. Every shadow seems alive. Every crack of a branch makes the heart stop for a moment. It is during the night that many people begin making mistakes, running without a plan, falling, getting injured, losing their remaining strength. But there is another side to the story. Sometimes children survived, and sometimes they survived far better than anyone would expect. Why? Because children of hunter-gatherers learned about the natural world from a very early age. They knew where water could be found, which plants were safe, what familiar paths looked like, how to navigate using the sun and the landscape. Of course, their knowledge was limited, but sometimes it was enough. And here we arrive at an unexpected question. What was the greatest enemy of a lost child? If you think about it, it was rarely wolves, not bears, not darkness. Very often, the greatest threat was panic. Because fear leads people to make bad decisions. It erases landmarks. It destroys clear thinking. It pushes people to keep moving when they should stop. That is why many modern safety recommendations for lost children sound surprisingly familiar. Stop. Stay calm. Do not wander aimlessly. Try to remember your surroundings. These are essentially the same principles that helped our distant ancestors survive thousands of years ago. And when we look at human history as a whole, something remarkable becomes clear. Humans survived not because they were the strongest creatures on Earth, and not because they were the fastest. They survived because of memory, knowledge, observation, and the ability to stay calm when everything seemed hopeless. Getting lost is frightening today. But thousands of years ago, getting lost meant being alone against an entire world, a world that had no intention of helping you. And yet, sometimes even that was not enough to defeat a small child who desperately wanted to find the way home.